Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Preparing for your Windows Server 2008 Active Directory Configuring 70-640 Certification Exam. In this lesson, I'll start off by going through an exam overview where I give you all the documented details about this exam. Then we'll go through the specific exam objectives as they are listed by Microsoft. And then I'm going to give you some of my own personal study recommendations and exam preparation techniques. So first, let's look at an overview of the exam. Its title is TS, which stands for the MCTS, so Technology Specialist, Windows Server 2008 Active Directory Configuring. The number on the exam, the code, is 70-640. It is unknown exactly how many questions there are on the exam. Now, there are different websites that you can go to where people will say, hey, I went and saw that there were X number of questions on my exam, but Microsoft does not officially disclose the number of questions that you will see. Also, the number of questions can vary because sometimes Microsoft chooses to include beta questions which don't actually count towards the certification. They use them to help prepare for future exams. The passing score is 700. So, yes, you know what score you need to pass, but here's what you don't know. What you don't know is what that 700 is out of. That 700 might be out of a scale from 100 to 900. Or it might be on a scale of 0 to 1,000, where 700 is 70%. It might be on a scale up to 1,200, or maybe 1,500. We don't know. Microsoft intentionally does not disclose that information. They hide a bunch of this stuff because they want to maintain the value of certifications. And they partially maintain that value by not disclosing everything so that some of the bad people of the world don't really have the ability to go out there and share too much to have you cheat, basically, to get ready for the exam. So they don't tell you what that 700 represents. The reason they give you a number at all is because they used to just be pass-fail. You would take a test and it would just say you either passed or you failed. But the problem is a lot of people were very upset because if it said that they failed, they wanted some kind of a reference. Did I fail miserably or did I miss by one question? Now, that's why they've included the number 700. Because that way, when you see your score, although you still don't know what each question is necessarily worth, you know that if you get a score, let's say in the 600s, that you're probably pretty close. Whereas if you get a score in the 200s, you probably have a lot of work ahead of you. Now, the length of the test is 2 hours and 15 minutes, and that is the total time that you have to allocate at the testing center, which will include any surveys or comments that you want to make on the test questions to Microsoft. The test comes in many different languages. And Microsoft recommends that before you take this exam that you have a certain level of experience. Now, don't panic if you're looking at this and thinking, whoa, I don't have that. Does that mean I can't test? No, it doesn't mean that at all. As a matter of fact, the reason, as I was going through the course, we used the Global Mantics Corporation was in an attempt to kind of give you some of this experience. You have to realize that IT certification was designed to give credentials to experienced IT professionals. So if you are not experienced, if you are coming in with no experience and you're watching this course, you can still pass this test. Microsoft's just letting you know you're not necessarily who it was originally designed for. Now, as far as the actual objectives themselves, here they are as they are listed by Microsoft, although I do need to tell you, they do change from time to time. Matter of fact, I believe these objectives even changed once while I was creating this course. So, the exam objectives as of this moment say that 18% is going to be on configuring DNS for Active Directory, configuring zones, DNS server settings, zone transfers, and replication. 26% of the exam will be on configuring the actual Active Directory infrastructure itself, configuring a forest or domain, trusts, sites, Active Directory replication, global catalog, and your operations masters. 19% of the exam is covering the additional Active Directory server roles. Active Directory lightweight directory services, rights management services, federation services, certificate services, and also configuring a read-only domain controller. 24% of the exam is on creating and maintaining Active Directory objects, including automating creation of Active Directory accounts, maintaining Active Directory accounts, creating and applying group policy objects, configuring group policy object templates, configuring software deployment GPOs, configuring account policies, and audit policies. And then finally, we have the last 13%, which is on maintaining the Active Directory environment, including configuring backup and recovery, performing offline maintenance, and monitoring Active Directory. Now, you may have noticed as I went through these objectives that it pretty closely aligns with the different topics that were covered in this course. Now, when it comes to study recommendations, this is something that I feel pretty strongly about, that I've got it down pretty solid. Okay, I've taken over 30 of these exams over the years, and I'll tell you, I used to say that I've never failed one. I actually just recently did fail an exam for the first time, had to go back and take it a second time. But outside of that, I've never failed. So I think I pretty much got it down on how to go about studying for this. So I'm going to share with you how I study, and then I want you to take from that whatever makes sense. Okay, and I really want to emphasize that. Nobody can tell you exactly what you need to do. Even I can't tell you exactly what you need to do. Part of studying for a certification exam like this is knowing a little bit about yourself, knowing what works for you. So I'm going to share with you my recommendations on how I do it. You take the stuff that makes sense, and if there's stuff that you're not sure if it makes sense or not, well, what I've recommended to my students over the years is, why don't you try it? Why don't you try my way, see what happens, and then modify from there. I've also had students who have studied their own way, didn't want to have anything to do with my way, and they failed the exam and came back to me and said, now what do I do? And I say, hey, you know what? Why don't you try it my way and see what happens? Okay? But nobody, including me, should ever tell you exactly 100% how you're going to get ready, because only you know yourself. Now, all that said, here's what I recommend. First of all, review all the lessons. If you are looking for certification and you skipped any of the lessons just because you think you know that material already, I recommend you go back and review it anyway. Okay? I recommend that you go back and watch a lesson that you skipped, even if you think you know it, because I might throw something at you that you didn't otherwise already know. Also, go through the outline and review everything that we've covered and make sure that you feel confident that you understand all the different topics. Use the Transcender practice tests as additional study material. It's why we give it to you. Okay? We don't give it to you just in case you want it. If you are studying for the certification exam, use the Transcender practice tests. That's what they're there for. Now, I've mentioned this before and I'll mention it again, but there is also a couple of additional Transcender specific lessons that we've included with this course. One on how to install it, and the other on how to use it. And I strongly recommend that you watch those lessons, because I have seen a lot of people misuse products like Transcender, and I have, again, a pretty solid recommendation on how you should use that product. Now, this is one of my most highly recommended study practices, and that is practice, practice, practice. And then when you think you've practiced enough, practice some more. Remember, these are experience-based exams. Microsoft never intended for anybody to just memorize how to do things and then go pass the test. You are expected that you have actually touched the stuff that you're being tested on. So practice as much as possible. Now, if necessary, if there is any subject that you still feel that you're struggling with, okay, so you've watched all my lessons. You've gone back and reviewed some of the lessons. You've gone through the transcenders. And you're still feeling that there's any area that you're struggling in. Here is an additional publication which is certified by Microsoft. Okay, it's a book published by Microsoft Press called Configuring Windows Server 2008 Active Directory Self-Paced Training Kit. I've included the ISBN, make it nice and easy for you to look up and find. It is a book that I own. It's a book that I've used as reference material when there's information that I feel at all lost on. So it's not something that I'm saying you have to go out and get by any stretch of the imagination, but if you feel that there's any additional supplemental material that you need, there's a lot of it out there, and here is one that is certified by Microsoft that you can go out and get. Now, when it comes to exam preparation, here's the first thing. When you feel that you are almost ready, right? You've gone through and you're feeling pretty solid that you understand this stuff. Schedule your exam. Sit down, go on to the internet. I've included a link to Prometric's website where you take the test. Go to that website and schedule the exam out a week or two. It is significant that you do that. It is significant that you set a date and then you stick with that date. But in that 1 to 2 weeks, continue to study, continue going through the practice tests. Keep this stuff fresh in your mind. Keep solidifying this information. Now, I should add that if you never get to the point that you feel you're almost ready, then go ahead and schedule the exam anyway. I have been with many students over the years who have insisted, but I'm not ready, but I'm not ready, but I'm not ready. Well, you're never really fully ready. I mean, I can tell you, I've taken over 30 of these exams, and I've only once got a perfect score. Okay? And even that, I'll be honest with you, it was a 30-question exam. I knew 27 of them. 3 of them I guessed, and I got lucky. Nobody can ever 100% be ready. So if you're not quite feeling ready, if you're just constantly nervous, the best thing you can do, schedule that test about 2 weeks out. Just have that on the calendar. Have the calendar in front of you every day and say, look, no matter what, I'm going to go do it. You'd be surprised how many people told me there's no way they're ready. I forced them to sign up for the exam. They did what they had to do. They studied some more. That day came along. They went and took the test, and they passed. So if you're feeling nervous, you're feeling like you're never ready, schedule the test and give it a shot. Now, when it comes to the evening before the test, okay, so you've scheduled the test out, you've been studying, you've been going through the practice test. It's now the night before. The night before, by this point, you should be ready. You should not be staying up cramming all night long. You shouldn't be waking up the next morning and going, oh my goodness, I still need to go through and study some more. You should be ready. So the night before the test, you may lightly review the material, just kind of put things fresh on your mind, but you should not be over cramming. Some other recommendations, and this is what I do, eat a good meal. have a good meal for dinner, do something fun, and get to bed early. Now, you know what these things all point to? Having a good meal, doing something fun, and going to bed early? Well, you're nourishing yourself, you're resting your brain, and as far as the doing something fun, well, you're just putting yourself into a relaxed state. Because honestly, when you go to take these exams, relax. That's all it is. It's a test. And if you fail, you know what that means? You got to take it again. No big deal. Yes, I know these tests cost money, but outside of the money, it's no big deal. I know people who have taken the test 5 times, 6 times, failed, and then passed on their next try. And guess what? Their transcript doesn't say, oh, you failed 6 times, and then you passed on this date. No. It only says the date that you passed. That's all it says. So, do stuff that's going to relax yourself. Now, when it comes to the day of the test, well, I already told you, you put yourself into a relaxed state the night before, try to stay relaxed. I know a lot of people do wake up the day of a test and they start to panic. Don't. It's just not worth it. By panicking, all you're doing is reducing the chances of you passing the test. When you get to the day of the test, there is nothing more that you really can do. Either you're ready or you're not. And the result of whether you're ready or not will be known when you're done with the test. So try to stay relaxed. Have a light meal before you go to the test center. Okay, you can have something healthy, but keep it light. You don't want to suddenly have an upset stomach. You don't want to suddenly have to go to the bathroom. Just have a light meal to make sure that you are nourished. And by the way, I should emphasize, I talk about like not overeating or eating bad food. Make sure you do eat. Okay, a lot of people on the day of the test, they just won't eat. They're too nervous. Don't be. I could tell you about a student who came into my center once, and this was when I worked at a test center because I'm a certified test administrator as well. This young lady came into my test center, and she was in such bad shape that she literally was shaking. And I quizzed her a little bit about what was going on, and I come to find out that she was so nervous that she hadn't slept the night before, she didn't eat for about 24 hours, she hadn't had anything to drink. So what happened? She was sleep deprived, dehydrated, and malnourished. What kind of a place is that to take a test? Okay, so don't do that to yourself. Now the other thing I want to tell you when it comes to the day of the test, plan on arriving at the test center 30 to 45 minutes early. There are way too many things that can get in the way. Traffic, accidents, detours, weather, all kinds of different things that could make you late for the exam, and you don't need the stress of being late for the exam. So if you plan on being there 30 to 45 minutes early, even if something gets in the way, odds are you're still going to be on time and you don't have to be panicked. Now, if nothing gets in the way and you truly get there 30 to 45 minutes early, don't sit there and freak out. Bring a book with you. Bring this course with you, if maybe you have a laptop or something. Bring some kind of light study material. I know the trans centers include some flashcards. Maybe you bring those with you. Again, you should not be cramming for the exam, but you can lightly review the material just to kill that time so that you're not sitting there getting nervous. At the testing center, make sure you bring 2 forms of identification. Leave everything else in the car or at home. This is very important. Some test centers are more strict than others, but basically the rules say that you got to have the 2 forms of identification, but almost anything else that you bring in, almost anything else at all, your wallet, a cell phone, pager, anything, they have to take it from you. So rather than have them take it from you, why don't you just leave it in the car, or maybe better yet, just leave it at home. When I go into a test, I have my two forms of identification. I have my driver's license and a credit card. And I have my car keys. And that's it. One time, I took the train to the test center, and I didn't even have car keys. I just had the two forms of identification, and that's it. I know too many people who have told me that they sat taking an exam, and they sat there nervous because they were worried that their wallet may not be safe, or their purse may not be safe with the person who they left it with. Because you don't know the person at the test center. So do yourself a favor. Don't even bring it in. Now, some of these examples, as I was mentioning, would be cell phone, calculators, study notes. That's always a fun one when people bring in their study notes. You can't take those in with you. And again, as I mentioned before, if you have spare time, do a light review of the material. During the test, read every single question carefully. Some people like to do these tips and tricks that they read about on the internet where you just go to the last line of a question because that'll be the actual question they're looking for. I don't recommend it. Microsoft has learned that technique and they've intentionally skewed it so that that last line doesn't necessarily give you the full question or the correct question. Read the full question carefully. You should have enough time to do that. Make sure you read all the answers before you choose the one that you are going to say is the best answer. Again, a bad habit people get into is they will read a question and then they will look at answer A and they'll say, that makes sense. They'll pick it and they'll move on to the next question. The problem is A may not have been the best answer, and without reading answers B, C, D, or however many answers there are, you might have just answered the wrong answer. Now, another thing I will tell you is, and this is just standard test taking technique, when you look at the multiple choice answers, eliminate the obvious wrong answers first, and then make your selection from the remaining choices. You'd be surprised how many questions you might feel a little bit lost on. You're not really sure what the answer is, but you can look at the answers and say, well, of the 4 that you've given me, I know 2 of them are definitely wrong. Well, that's great. You've just narrowed your chances down to a 50-50 guess. That's much better than randomly taking a 25% guess, right? So always start with eliminating the wrong answers and then go and pick from the remaining choices. Make sure you answer all the questions. There is no penalty for guessing on these exams. A question that you get wrong is equally as wrong as a question that you just don't answer. So make sure that you answer all questions. Another standard test taking technique is that what you should do is go through multiple rounds. Meaning you go through the questions once and you answer the ones that you know and you mark the questions that you're not sure about and come back to them later. The reason you want to do this is because you don't want to get hung up for a long period of time on a question that you're finding to be really, really difficult. And then suddenly you look up at the clock and you've got 10 more questions to go and 1 minute left. Because what are you going to do? You're going to go through and randomly just click, 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 just answer some random answer for those last 10. The problem is those 10 might have been the easiest 10 questions on the whole test, and you would have gotten all 10 of those right. But now you're only going to get a certain percentage of those right because you're randomly guessing. All because you got stuck for a long time on a more difficult question that you, in all likeliness, might get wrong anyway. So save those for the end of the test. And then those can be the ones that you randomly guess on if you're running out of time. Now, I have to tell you, this right here is my absolute number one recommendation. Do not panic. There is never a reason to panic on this stuff. It's just a test. I have yet to meet a person who was able to tell me that they took a test that was a matter of life and death. It's just a test, and if you fail, then you have to take it again. Now, the other thing that I'm going to tell you when it comes to not panicking, it's okay if you are not sure of the answer to a few questions. That's normal. I already told you, I only once got a perfect score. And even on that test, I can tell you, I didn't know all the questions. I got lucky on a few. Microsoft does not expect you to get a perfect score on these tests. You're only supposed to get a 700. And I can guarantee you that 700 is never a perfect score. That I can tell you. So if you're not sure of the answer to an occasional question, no problem. Put it to the end. Maybe it'll come to you. Otherwise, just take a guess. This is a common saying that I love to say to all my students, and that is that a medical student that graduates last in their class, okay, so you have a class full of medical students, and the one that got the lowest score but graduated, you know what we call them? We call that person doctor. We call that person a doctor because they did graduate. That's the same thing here. You only need a 700 to pass the exam. If you get a 700 on the button, great, you passed. That's all that matters. Again, your transcript only says that you passed. It does not say what your score is. And I can tell you that even as an instructor, I have never once been asked by a single employer or a prospective employer in a job interview what score I got on a test. Microsoft has gone out of their way to say that the score doesn't matter. If you passed, then you deserve the certification, and beyond that, it doesn't matter. That's why they used to do pass-fail, because they didn't want people being able to brag and say, well, I got this score, and this person got a lower score. To Microsoft, it doesn't matter. The person who gets a 700 is equal to the person that gets an 800, who is equal to the person who gets a 900, or whatever their score might be. So that brings us to the end of this lesson, where we went over an overview of the details of the exam, went over the exam objectives. I gave you some of my own personal study recommendations and exam preparation recommendations. And I have to re-emphasize, I just want to re-emphasize here, I'm telling you what I think works. You need to learn what works for you. And when you find that, go with it. Don't fight it. Don't say, well, I shouldn't be doing this because Ed said don't. No, no, no. If it works for you, then do it, regardless of what I said. So, that's what I have for you when it comes to preparing for the exam. I hope that helps, and I wish you luck. And I would love to hear from you once you have taken the exam.